Hi all, welcome to Kaomi Dev Studio. More practice papers didn't work. That was the first thing I had to admit to myself as a father. My daughter did every paper I bought her, and her results kept getting worse. And scientists who've studied this for 20 years say the kids it hits hardest are the prepared ones. She's 11, primary 6, and the big exam is 10 weeks away. The night before her last class test, I tested her myself at the kitchen table. She knew everything. I asked. She answered. I ticked. My wife set the kitchen timer for 40 minutes, and she finished with time to spare. 2 days later, the paper came back with a 48 out of 100, and questions she had answered for me 2 nights before were sitting there blank, completely blank. I asked her what happened. She looked at the floor and said, "I knew it, Pa. I really knew it." Then in the hall, my mind just went white. Here's the part I didn't know back then. There's a 10-minute trick tested in real classrooms that lifted anxious students by nearly a full grade, and it costs nothing. When she was 8, she used to slide her workbook across this same table and grin at me. "Ask me anything, Pa. Ask me the hard one. That girl didn't go anywhere." I just didn't understand what was happening to her in that exam hall. If your child studies hard but blanks out when it counts, please subscribe, because what I found changed how we do everything, and the exam is almost here. Does this sound familiar? Your child knows the work at home, answers everything at the dinner table, then walks into the exam hall and comes out with a score that makes no sense. You check the paper, and the mistakes aren't even the hard questions. They're the easy ones. For weeks, I wrote careless in my head every time I signed her test paper. Then one night, I found a researcher named Sian Beilock. She ran a lab at the University of Chicago studying something scientists call choking under pressure, and one of her findings stopped me cold. Your child's working memory is like a mental whiteboard, and worry writes on the same whiteboard. When a child sits in an exam hall thinking, "What if I fail? What will Pa say?" everyone else is on question 5 already. Those thoughts are physically taking up the space the math was supposed to use. The formula didn't leave her brain. The worry pushed it out of the workspace. That night, I asked my daughter a different question. I asked, when it went white, what was in your head? She thought about it and said that everyone's pen was moving except mine. Beilock's lab found something even stranger. They tested students under pressure, and the ones who choked the most were the ones with the highest working memory. The strongest students fall the hardest, because their way of solving things depends on the very workspace that pressure eats first. I read that line 3 times, because it means blanking out isn't a character flaw. That's the mechanics of a brain under threat. What I did next made it worse, though, and I had been doing it every single night. Let me describe our old evening routine, and you can tell me if it sounds like your house. Dinner ends at 7:30. The practice paper hits the table by 7:45. I sit beside her with a red pen, the kitchen timer ticking between us. When she slows down, I sigh. I don't mean to sigh, but I sigh. When she gets one wrong, I say, "We did this one last week. Come on." When she stares out the window, I tap the table twice. One night she said, without looking up, "I'm doing it, Pa, I'm doing it." Her pencil wasn't even moving. I thought I was helping. In my head, that was love. There's a study I wish someone had shown me a year earlier. Researchers at the University of Chicago followed hundreds of families through a school year and measured the parents' own anxiety about math. The children of anxious parents learned less math over the year and grew more anxious themselves. Here's the twist that got me. This only happened in families where the anxious parent helped with homework often. When those same parents stepped back, the damage mostly disappeared. The helping was the delivery mechanism. My tension, my sighs, my tapping on the table, every night I sat down to help. I was handing my daughter my own fear, one practice paper at a time. She has a way of holding her pencil now, gripped so tight her knuckles go pale. I never noticed it until the night I stopped watching the paper and started watching her. After she slept that night, I sat at the kitchen table with her old workbooks from primary 2 and primary 3. Big loopy handwriting, silly doodles in the margins, and full marks page after page. "Ask me anything, Pa. Ask me the hard one." Somewhere between that girl and this one, the fun had drained out, and I was starting to see my own fingerprints on it. Before I could fix anything, I had to answer one question. Why did she look so solid at home in the first place? Was the knowing at home even real? The honest answer is partly no, and that part was nobody's fault either. What we called revision was mostly her reading her notes again and highlighting them. Psychologists call this the fluency illusion. It's like recognizing a song on the radio and believing you could sing it alone on a stage. Recognizing and producing are 2 different skills, and exams only pay for the second one. When I quizzed her at the table, I was accidentally doing something better, forcing her to pull answers out of her own head with no notes in sight. Scientists call that retrieval practice, and decades of studies show it beats rereading by a wide margin. Ask me the ratios, 1, she'd say at that table, and she'd get it right every single time, 2 feet from Pa, in the most comfortable room in her world, with nothing on the line. An exam hall is not a kitchen table. It's rows of desks, a clock on the wall, a stranger walking up and down, and that terrible sound of everyone else's pens moving when yours has stopped. The first time her knowledge ever met that room was the day the marks actually counted. Once I saw it that way, the plan came down to 2 changes. One takes 10 minutes and a piece of rough paper, and the other cost me my seat at the table. The first change comes from an experiment published in the journal Science, run in real classrooms with real final exams. Researchers, Gerardo Ramirez and Sian Beilock, split students into groups right before the exam. One group sat quietly for 10 minutes. The other group spent those 10 minutes writing about exactly what they were afraid of. They weren't revising. They were writing about the fear itself. Things like, I might blank out. My parents will be disappointed. Everyone will know. The quiet group performed the way anxious students usually perform. The writing group's anxious students jumped nearly a full grade from around a B- to a B+, because putting the worry on paper is like closing 10 browser tabs before the exam even starts. Once the fear is offloaded, it stops circling in working memory, and the space it was hogging goes back to the math. I tried it on a Tuesday morning before her school's practice paper. I gave her a piece of rough paper at breakfast and said, write down everything you're scared of about today. She looked at me like I had grown a second head. Someone will see it. Nobody will read it. Pa promise, not even me. She wrote one line, then another, and then her pencil didn't stop for 6 minutes. She folded it into her pocket, and I still don't know what she wrote, because the whole point was that it belonged to her. That evening, she came home and said, the paper felt smaller, Pa, smaller, not easier. Like the exam had shrunk into something that fits inside one school bag instead of filling the whole hall. The rough paper handled the fear on exam mornings, but the bigger problem lived in every evening in between, and that problem was sitting in my chair. The second change was harder because the second change was me. Beilock's lab also studied how experts survive pressure, and the answer is almost boring. You practice in small doses of the same pressure. Students who did practice tests under mild time pressure barely dropped on the real day, while students who only studied in comfort collapsed. Pressure. The brain has met before stops being an emergency. We rebuilt our evenings around that one idea. Twice a week, my daughter does a full paper at a cleared desk, timer running, door open to the noise of the flat, and me nowhere in sight. Wrong answers cost nothing on those nights. We check the paper together afterwards, and the first thing I ask is, where did your brain try to run away, and what did you do? On the other nights, we close the assessment books completely. She quizzes me now. She sets 10 questions and marks my answers with the red pen, and I get things wrong on purpose, and sometimes not on purpose. And when I messed up a fractions question last week, she put on this stern teacher voice and said, we did this one last week, Pa. Come on. Then she laughed because she knows exactly which night she took that line from. The first time she laughed at that table again, I realized how long it had been quiet. Her mock exam came back 2 weeks ago at 68, 20 points clear of the blank page day, with every question attempted and no white space anywhere. She pointed at question 7, the hardest one on the paper, and said, I felt it going white, Pa. I breathed like we practiced, wrote my working line by line, and it came back. The score wasn't the part I kept thinking about. She had watched her own mind start to slip, and she had pulled it back with her own 2 hands. Nobody can sit beside her in that hall in 10 weeks. Whatever she carries in there has to be hers. This morning, she has an oral practice at school. I'm at the kitchen table with my coffee, and the kitchen timer is in the drawer where it sleeps most days now. We only take it out for exam weather nights, and she's the one who winds it. She comes out of her room in her uniform, eats her toast, standing up like always, and slings on her school bag. At the door, she stops and turns around. Test me tonight, Pa. Ask me the hard one. She's gone down the corridor before I can answer. I sit there for a while with my coffee going cold, looking at the 2 red pens standing in the cup by the fruit bowl. Hers is the newer one, and the cap is already chewed. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more trending videos like this one.